I had been lying motionless in that hospital bed for 3 days, but every whispered word from my son about transferring assets when mom loses capacity still cut through me like a dull knife. Let me tell you something about betrayal. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It doesn't come wearing a villain's mask or carrying a weapon. You can see, sometimes, betrayal comes in the form of morning tea served with a loving smile, prepared by the very hands that should protect you. My name is Margaret Thompson. I'm 72 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I thought I knew my family. I thought I understood the people I had raised, loved, and trusted with my life. I was wrong about almost everything, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning, because this story, my story, needs to be told exactly as it happened. Every detail matters. Every red flag I missed. Every instinct I ignored. Every moment of doubt I brushed aside as paranoia. Because what happened to me could happen to anyone. And I'll be damned if I let it happen to another mother, another family, another trusting soul who believes blood runs thicker than greed. 2 years ago, when my husband Frank passed away from a sudden heart attack, I thought my world had ended. We'd been married for 47 years. 47 years of building a life together in our 2-story colonial house in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. Frank and I had bought that house in 1978 for $32,000. Today, it's worth $85,000. Back then, it felt like the most money in the world. Today, I know it's enough to make family members lose their minds. Frank left me well provided for. Besides the house, which we'd paid off years ago, I had $32,000 in savings and a comfortable pension from my 30 years teaching elementary school. I wasn't rich, but I was secure, independent, proud of what Frank and I had accomplished together. After Frank died, the house felt enormous and empty. The silence was deafening. That's when my son David made what seemed like a generous offer. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone in that big house," he said, his voice thick with what I thought was genuine concern. "Ashley and I have been talking. Why don't we move in with you? Just temporarily. While you adjust." David was 45 then. My eldest child. He'd always been the responsible one, the one who called every Sunday, who remembered my birthday, who helped with home repairs without being asked. He worked in construction management, made decent money, had a nice wife named Ashley and 2 teenage kids. At least, that's what I thought. Ashley was 38, polished in that real estate agent way, always perfectly dressed, always knew exactly what everything was worth. She'd been selling homes in Portland for 12 years and had what she called an eye for value. I should have paid more attention to exactly what she was valuing. It would be such a help to us, too. "Mom," Ashley had added, placing her manicured hand on my arm, with Emma starting to look at colleges and Michael in high school. Having some extra space would be wonderful, and we could help with groceries, utilities, maintenance. It seemed perfect. I wouldn't be alone, and they'd have more room for their growing family. David and Ashley moved into the upstairs bedrooms that August. Emma and Michael got Frank's old study. I kept the master bedroom downstairs and felt grateful for the company. For the first year and a half, it worked beautifully. Ashley cooked dinner most nights. She was actually an excellent cook. David handled the lawn and minor repairs. The kids were respectful, did well in school. We felt like a real family again. I should have wondered why Ashley started taking such an interest in my morning routine. Ashley had always been attentive, but after they moved in, she became almost doting. Every morning at exactly 7:30 a.m., she'd appear in my kitchen with a steaming cup of chamomile tea. "Good morning, Margaret," she'd say with that bright smile. "I thought you might enjoy some tea before breakfast. It's supposed to be good for relaxation and sleep quality. I'm not really a tea person. I've always been more of a coffee drinker." But it seemed like such a thoughtful gesture. Ashley would stand there chatting while I drank it, asking about my plans for the day, commenting on the weather, sharing neighborhood gossip. It became our little ritual. "You're so good to me, dear," I'd tell her, and she'd beam like she'd just received the highest compliment. Looking back now, I can see how carefully orchestrated it all was, how she'd watch to make sure I finished every drop, how she'd quickly rinse the cup and put it in the dishwasher, how she'd suggest I take it easy on mornings when I felt particularly drowsy after our tea time. But hindsight is 20/20, isn't it? At the time, I just felt grateful to have a daughter-in-law who cared so much about my well-being. About 6 months ago, the questions started. Innocent at first, woven into casual conversation so smoothly I barely noticed. "Margaret, do you ever think about updating your will?" Ashley asked one evening while we were watching the news together. "I mean, it's been a couple years since Frank passed. Sometimes people's wishes change." "Oh, I don't know," I replied. "I haven't really thought about it. Everything's pretty straightforward." "Of course," she said quickly. "I just meant, tax laws change. Estate planning gets complicated. David and I were talking to our financial advisor, and he mentioned how important it is to keep these things current." David started chiming in too. "Mom, where do you keep all your important papers? Just in case of emergency. We should probably know where to find your insurance policies, bank statements, that sort of thing. They're in the filing cabinet in Frank's old office." I told him, "Same place they've always been. Mind if I take a look sometime? Just to make sure everything's organized. I could help you digitize some of the older documents." Again, it seemed reasonable, helpful. Even David was always good with paperwork and computers. Why wouldn't I want my son to help me get organized? But then the conversation started happening when they thought I couldn't hear them. I've always been a light sleeper. Frank used to joke that I could hear a pin drop 3 rooms away. It's a skill that served me well as a teacher. You learn to catch the whispered schemes before they become classroom chaos. So when David and Ashley started having hushed conversations in the kitchen after they thought I'd gone to bed, I heard them. "How much do you think the house is worth now?" Ashley's voice, barely above a whisper. "Real estate agent says probably $85,000. Maybe more. The neighborhood's really up and coming. And her savings. She's never told me exactly, but probably a few $100,000, maybe more. David, we need to think about the future. Your mother's getting older. What if something happens to her? What if she gets sick and needs long-term care? That money could disappear so fast. I know, but what can we do? It's her money, her house. There are ways. David, legal ways. Power of attorney. Estate planning. People do it all the time when their parents start showing signs of, decline. That conversation kept me awake for hours, not because I was angry, but because something about Ashley's tone bothered me. There was an eagerness there, a calculation that didn't match her usual warmth. I told myself I was being paranoid. They were my family. They loved me. They were just being practical, thinking ahead like responsible adults. God, I was naive. It was a Tuesday morning in late February when I first noticed something was seriously wrong. I'd had my usual tea with Ashley, and she'd been particularly chatty, asking if I'd given any more thought to organizing my affairs. About an hour later, as I was getting dressed for my weekly bridge game with the neighbors, the room started spinning. Not just a little dizziness, the whole world tilted sideways like I was on a carnival ride. I grabbed the bedpost to steady myself, but my legs felt like jelly. "Ashley," I called out, but my voice sounded strange to my own ears. Slurred and thick. She appeared in my doorway so quickly, you'd think she'd been waiting right outside. "Margaret, what's wrong?" "You look pale." "I feel dizzy, confused. I was supposed to go to bridge, but I can't remember if it's at Eleanor's house or Martha's." The look that flashed across Ashley's face lasted maybe half a second, but I caught it. Relief, not concern. Relief. "Oh, honey, maybe you should skip bridge today. Why don't you lie down for a bit? Sometimes these spells just pass." I let her help me back to bed. But something felt fundamentally wrong. I'd played bridge with the same group of women every Tuesday for 8 years. I knew it was at Eleanor's house. I'd known that for months. So why couldn't I remember? That afternoon, I called my doctor's office. The nurse said these things could happen with age, stress, medication interactions. She scheduled me for an appointment the following week, but the confusion didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention to my symptoms. The drowsiness always hit about an hour after my morning tea. The confusion was worst on mornings when Ashley seemed most insistent that I finish every drop. On the days when I skipped tea, when I left early for errands, or when Ashley was out running her own errands, my mind felt sharp as ever. I could remember names, dates, grocery lists, phone numbers. But after tea days, I'd forget conversations I'd had an hour earlier. I started testing myself, simple things. I'd write down what I planned to do that day before drinking my tea, then check the list an hour later on non-tea days. I could remember everything perfectly. On tea days, the list might as well have been written in a foreign language. The realization crept in slowly, then hit me all at once like ice water. Someone was drugging me, but it couldn't be Ashley. Sweet, thoughtful Ashley, who made me tea every morning because she cared about my health. It couldn't be David, my own son, who'd spent his childhood summers helping me plant flowers in the front yard. Could it? I started paying attention to things I'd been ignoring, like how David's work truck disappeared from the driveway for weeks at a time, like how Ashley stopped talking about her real estate sales, like how they'd both grown quiet whenever I mentioned anything about finances or future plans. One evening, while Ashley was at her book club and David was allegedly working late, I did something I'd never done before. I snooped. Frank's old office had become David and Ashley's overflow storage space. Bills, mail, papers scattered across the desk that used to be perfectly organized. What I found there made my blood run cold. Past due notices, 3 months behind on their mortgage, credit card statements with balances I couldn't believe. David had been out of work for 8 months. Not the temporary project gap he'd told me about. Ashley's real estate license had been suspended for some kind of ethics violation. They were drowning financially. And I, naive, trusting fool that I was, had been completely oblivious. But it got worse. Hidden under a stack of Ashley's real estate magazines, I found printed emails, correspondence with an estate planning attorney I'd never heard of, questions about expediting power of attorney for elderly parents showing cognitive decline, inquiries about the fastest legal methods for property transfer when an elderly homeowner becomes incapacitated. My hands shook as I read. These emails were dated 3 weeks ago, right around the time my confusion had started getting worse. I heard David's truck pulling into the driveway and quickly put everything back exactly as I'd found it. But as I made my way back to my bedroom, one phrase from those emails kept echoing in my mind, accelerating the cognitive decline documentation process. They weren't just stealing from me. They were deliberately making me sick to justify stealing from me. And that's when I realized something that would change everything. If they thought I was losing my mind, I could use that against them. I could make them believe their plan was working while I gathered evidence to destroy them. The game was about to begin, but they had no idea I'd figured out the rules. That night, lying in the bed I'd shared with Frank for decades, in the house we'd built our dreams in, I made a decision that would either save me or destroy what was left of my family. I was going to beat them at their own game. Tomorrow morning, I would drink Ashley's tea with a smile. I would let the drugs cloud my thinking just enough to maintain their illusion. But this time, I'd be watching, listening, recording everything, because Margaret Thompson didn't survive the Great Depression, raise 4 children, build a 30-year teaching career, and bury the love of her life just to be taken down by a greedy son and his calculating wife. They wanted to see a confused old woman. I'd give them the performance of a lifetime, but first, I needed to make some phone calls to people I could trust, and I needed to prepare for the fight of my life. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. No tea in my system meant no fog in my brain. I could think, plan, strategize, but when Ashley knocked on my bedroom door at 7:30 sharp with that familiar cup and saucer, I was ready to give the performance of my life. "Good morning. Margaret, how are you feeling today?" I looked up at her with what I hoped was the right amount of confusion. "Ashley, oh, good morning, dear. I think I'm all right." "What day is it?" The flash of satisfaction in her eyes was unmistakable. "It's Wednesday. Remember, you seemed a little confused yesterday." "Did I?" I accepted the tea with slightly trembling hands. Not hard to fake when rage was coursing through my veins. I don't really remember yesterday very well. That's okay. "Honey, sometimes our minds play tricks on us as we get older. This tea should help you feel more relaxed." I sipped slowly, forcing myself not to gag. Chamomile tea had never tasted this bitter before. Whatever they were putting in it, they weren't even trying to mask the flavor anymore. "Ashley, can I ask you something?" I said, channeling every confused elderly person I'd ever seen in movies. "Of course. I'm Margaret. Do you think I'm losing my mind?" The way her face lit up was absolutely chilling. "Oh, sweetie, no, you're just having some normal age-related changes. Nothing to worry about. That's why David and I are here, to take care of you." I finished the tea and handed her the empty cup. "Thank you. Dear, you're so good to me." As she left my room, I heard her humming. Actually humming like she'd just received wonderful news. Over the next week, I established a routine that would save my life. Before Ashley brought my morning tea, I'd complete a series of mental exercises I'd developed during my teaching years. Memory games, word problems, reciting poems I'd memorized decades ago. Then, after drinking the tea, I'd try the same exercises and document the difference. The results were terrifying and infuriating in equal measure. Pre-tea, I could recite the Gettysburg Address flawlessly, remember every student's name from my 1987 third grade class, and solve complex math problems in my head. Post-tea, I struggled to remember what I'd eaten for breakfast, couldn't recall my neighbor's name, and felt like I was thinking through thick cotton. I started hiding a small notebook in my nightstand, recording everything with the kind of detail that would make a prosecutor weep with joy. Times, symptoms, conversations, observations. On my clearer days, I researched online. What I found made my stomach turn. Diphenhydramine, the active ingredient in Benadryl, could cause severe confusion, memory loss, and cognitive impairment in elderly people, especially at high doses. It was odorless, largely tasteless, and would show up in blood tests if anyone thought to look for it. But who would think to look? A confused elderly woman having memory problems. That's just normal aging. Right. Wrong. It was attempted murder. Served with morning tea and a smile. By the third week of my performance, David and Ashley had grown comfortable with my supposed decline. They spoke more freely around me, sometimes acting as if I wasn't even in the room. That's when I overheard the conversation that changed everything. I was sitting in the living room, supposedly watching television but actually straining to hear Ashley on the phone in the kitchen. She thought I was too out of it to pay attention. "Hi. Is this Richardson and Associates Estate Planning?" "Yes. I'd like to schedule a consultation. It's regarding my mother-in-law who's showing rapid cognitive decline." "Yes. We need to discuss power of attorney options. How quickly can this process be expedited if the client is becoming incompetent?" My blood turned to ice. Richardson and Associates was a real firm. I'd seen their ads on television. This wasn't some fantasy. They were taking concrete steps. But it got worse. The next day, David made a call that nearly broke my heart. "Robert, it's David. Listen, I need to talk to you about Mom. No, she's not dead, but her mind is going fast. Really fast. Rob, she can barely remember our names some days. I think we need to have a family meeting about her care and, well, her assets. Can you fly down from Seattle this weekend?" My brother-in-law, Robert, was Frank's younger brother, a retired Boeing engineer who'd always been protective of me since Frank died. If David could convince Robert that I was losing my mind, he'd have an ally with actual credibility. That afternoon, while David was allegedly job hunting and Ashley was at what she claimed was a real estate seminar, I made my own phone calls. First, I called Dr. Susan Chen, my primary care physician for the past 15 years. "Dr. Chen, it's Margaret Thompson. I need to ask you something confidential, and I need you to listen carefully because I might not have much time." "Margaret, you sound stressed. What's going on?" "I believe someone in my household is drugging me. I need you to know that any reports of cognitive decline or confusion you might receive about me should be viewed with extreme suspicion." The silence on the other end lasted so long I thought the call had dropped. "Margaret, that's a very serious accusation. Are you certain?" "I'm more certain than I've ever been about anything in my life. If I come in for an appointment in the next few weeks, especially if I'm brought in by my son or daughter-in-law, I need you to order comprehensive blood work. Test for everything, but especially diphenhydramine and other sleep aids. Yes, of course." "Margaret, are you safe right now?" "For now. But please, Dr. Penn, document this conversation, date and timestamp it. I have a feeling I'm going to need proof that I was lucid when I made this call." My second call was even more important. "Thomas Mitchell Law Office. This is Rebecca speaking." "Rebecca, it's Margaret Thompson. Is Tom available? I need to speak with him urgently." Thomas Mitchell had been Frank's attorney and close friend for 25 years. If anyone would believe me and know how to help, it was Tom. "Margaret, how are you holding up? I've been meaning to call and check on you." "Tom, I need your help. And I need you to not ask questions until I finish talking." I told him everything. The tea, the symptoms, the overheard conversations, the financial records I'd found. When I finished, the line was quiet for a long moment. "Jesus Christ. Margaret, how long has this been going on?" "About 6 weeks of active drugging, but I think they've been planning this for months." "Okay, listen to me carefully. Don't let on that you know anything. Keep drinking the tea if you have to, but document everything. I'm going to make some calls. There's a private investigator I work with who specializes in elder abuse cases. And Margaret, yes, you're not crazy, and you're not paranoid. What you're describing is textbook elder financial abuse. It happens more often than people think, and it's a felony in Oregon." My third call was to my daughter Linda in San Francisco. Linda had always been my truth teller, the child who couldn't lie if her life depended on it. She was also an investigative journalist for the San Francisco Chronicle, which meant she understood both evidence and storytelling. "Mom, is everything okay? You sound weird." "Linda, I need you to sit down. What I'm about to tell you is going to sound insane, but I need you to believe me and I need your help." When I finished explaining, Linda was silent for exactly 10 seconds. Then, "So those motherfuckers." "Linda, no. Mom, those absolute motherfuckers. I never liked Ashley. And David's been acting weird for months. Remember Christmas? He kept asking about your plans and whether you'd considered your options for the future. I thought he was just being concerned. He was being concerned, all right. Concerned about when he could get his hands on your money. Mom, I'm flying up there tomorrow." "No, Linda, not yet. I need more evidence. And I need them to think their plan is working." but I might need you to come up for a specific event in the next few weeks." What kind of event? The kind where we catch them red-handed and destroy them completely. Armed with my secret support network, I began phase 2 of my plan, giving David and Ashley exactly what they wanted while building an ironclad case against them. I started forgetting more obvious things. Wrong names for familiar people, confusion about dates and times. I'd ask the same questions multiple times in a single conversation. I even forgot how to work the television remote one evening, sitting in my chair looking helpless until David came to help. "Mom, are you feeling all right? You seem more confused lately." "Do I?" I looked up at him with what I hoped was the right amount of vacant concern. "I feel fine, but sometimes I can't remember things. Like yesterday, I couldn't remember Mrs. Patterson's name. You know, our neighbor. I've known her for 15 years. I watched him exchange a look with Ashley across the room. It was the look of two people whose plan was working perfectly. The next morning, Ashley increased the dosage. I could taste the difference immediately. The tea was more bitter, and the effects hit faster and harder. Within 30 minutes, I was genuinely struggling to form coherent thoughts. Whatever they were giving me, it was dangerous at these levels. But I played along, stumbling over simple words, looking confused when Ashley asked basic questions. "Margaret, do you remember what year it is?" I paused, pretending to struggle. "It's 2023. Or is it 2024? I'm not sure. It's 2024. "Sweetie, do you remember who the president is?" Another pause. "Obama." Ashley practically glowed with satisfaction. "Close. Honey, it's actually, well, it doesn't matter. Why don't you rest?" By the 4th week, David and Ashley had grown bold enough to discuss their plans openly in front of me. Assuming I was too far gone to understand or remember, the attorney says if we can get 3 witnesses to attest to her incompetence, the power of attorney can be processed within a week, Ashley said while I sat in my chair, supposedly watching morning television. 3 witnesses. Your brother Robert, Dr. Jen after we bring her in for evaluation, and maybe Linda when she comes to visit. If Linda sees how bad Mom's gotten, she'll support the decision. What about the house? Once we have power of attorney, we can list it immediately. My old broker says in this market, it could sell within 30 days. We'll tell everyone we're moving Margaret to a nice assisted living facility. Which assisted living facility? Ashley's laugh was cold. David, honey, at the rate she's declining, we won't need to worry about long-term care. The stress of moving, the change in environment, sometimes elderly people just don't adjust well to transitions. The meaning behind her words hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just planning to steal my house and money. They were planning to put me somewhere I'd deteriorate quickly and die, leaving them free to inherit everything without the inconvenience of actually caring for me. I sat in that chair, fighting every instinct to leap up and scream, and instead forced myself to remain perfectly still, because now I knew the full scope of their plan, and I could destroy them completely. But first, I needed one more piece of evidence, something so damning, so undeniable, that no jury in the world would believe their lies. I needed them to try to kill me. Tuesday, March 15th. I remembered the date because I'd written it down the night before, along with a prediction. Tomorrow, they will escalate to a dangerous level. I was right. Ashley brought my tea that morning with an almost festive energy. Good morning, Margaret. I made your tea extra strong today. You seemed restless last night, so I thought you could use some extra relaxation. The cup felt heavier than usual. When I lifted it to my lips, the bitter taste was almost overwhelming. Whatever was in there, it was enough to kill a horse, let alone a 72-year-old woman. I drank it anyway, because I needed the evidence, because I needed them to believe they'd won. About 20 minutes later, the world started dissolving around me. This wasn't the mild confusion I'd been experiencing. This was full cognitive shutdown. My vision blurred, my speech slurred beyond recognition, and I genuinely felt like I was dying. "Ashley," I managed to say, though it came out as barely a whisper. "Something's wrong." She was beside me instantly, but instead of calling 911, she called David. "David, you need to come home now. Your mother's having some kind of episode. She's barely conscious." No, I think this might be it, the big one we've been expecting. As I slumped in my chair, fighting to stay conscious, I heard her make her second call. "Richardson and Associates. This is Ashley Thompson. We spoke about my mother-in-law's power of attorney. I think we need to move up our timeline. She's having a major cognitive event right now. Yes, we can be there this afternoon if necessary." Then, as my world went black, I heard the most chilling words of all. Finally, when I woke up, I was in Providence Portland Medical Center, surrounded by concerned faces and beeping machines. David was holding my hand, tears in his eyes that I now knew were tears of relief, not sorrow. "Mom, can you hear me? You gave us such a scare." I looked at him with genuine confusion, though not for the reasons he thought. How had my own son, the boy I'd rocked to sleep countless nights, the young man I'd been so proud of when he graduated high school, the father who'd brought me my beautiful grandchildren, how had he become someone who could look me in the eye while slowly poisoning me to death? But I was about to find out exactly how deep their betrayal went, because lying in that hospital bed, pretending to be confused and helpless, I was going to hear things that would make what they'd already done seem almost kind by comparison. The real horror was just beginning. Lying in that hospital bed, I discovered I had a talent I never knew existed. The ability to appear unconscious while remaining completely aware. It's harder than you might think. You have to control your breathing, relax every muscle in your face, and resist the urge to react no matter what you hear. The first night was practice. Nurses came and went, checking my vitals, adjusting my IV. I learned to slow my breathing just enough to seem deeply sedated without actually falling asleep. I learned to keep my eyelids completely still even when bright lights were shined directly at them. By the second night, I was ready for the real performance. David and Ashley arrived for evening visiting hours around 7 p.m. They sat beside my bed and spoke in hushed tones, their words cutting through me like surgical knives. "The doctor said she might be like this for days," David whispered. "Or longer." "Good," Ashley replied without hesitation. "That gives us time to move forward with everything. I've scheduled the power of attorney meeting for Friday. Richardson thinks we can have everything signed and notarized by the weekend. What if she wakes up before then?" "David, look at her. Look at the monitors. She's barely there. And even if she does wake up, she'll be so confused she won't remember any of this." The doctor said the stroke could have caused permanent cognitive damage. Stroke. They were telling everyone I'd had a stroke. But I knew better. The only thing that had struck me was a massive overdose of sleeping medication disguised as caring concern. How quickly can we list the house? I've already called 3 agents. Market analysis says we can list at $87,500 and probably get multiple offers within a week. In this market, cash buyers are everywhere. And Mom, Sunset Manor has an opening next month. It's adequate. Medicaid will cover most of it once her assets are properly transferred. I had to bite the inside of my cheek to keep from reacting. Sunset Manor was a Medicaid facility on the other side of town. I'd driven past it countless times. The windows were barred. The parking lot was full of potholes. And the online reviews were devastating. People went to Sunset Manor to die, not to live. "Ashley, are you sure about this?" "She's my mother." "David, your mother is going to die anyway, probably within the next 2 years, given her condition. Do you want to spend those 2 years watching your children lose their college funds and your marriage fall apart because we're drowning in debt? Or do you want to secure your family's future?" When you put it like that, I am putting it like that. This is about survival. David, your survival, your children's future. Your mother had her life, a good, long life. Now it's time for her to provide for the next generation. The casual cruelty in Ashley's voice was breathtaking. She was discussing my death like a business transaction, weighing the pros and cons of my continued existence against their financial convenience. But she wasn't done. Besides, once we get the power of attorney, we can adjust her medication regimen, make sure she's comfortable. There are ways to ensure elderly patients don't suffer unnecessarily. The meaning was clear. They were planning to overdose me permanently once they had legal control. I lay there, fighting every maternal instinct to sit up and slap sense into my son, and instead memorized every word. Because this conversation, this moment, was going to be their downfall. The next morning, I had visitors I actually wanted to see. Dr. Chen arrived for her morning rounds, and when David and Ashley stepped out to get coffee, she leaned close to my ear. "Margaret, if you can hear me, I need you to know that I remembered our conversation. I've ordered comprehensive blood work, and I've documented everything you told me. Your friend Thomas Mitchell called me yesterday. We're going to help you." I wanted to squeeze her hand, to let her know I was aware and grateful, but I couldn't risk it. "Not yet. Also," she whispered, "there's a recording device in your bed rail. Thomas arranged it through a private investigator. Everything they say in this room is being documented." My heart nearly stopped. Tom was 3 steps ahead.
As always.
That afternoon brought the conversation I'd been waiting for, the one that would seal David and Ashley's fate forever. They thought I was deeply sedated after the morning's medication adjustment. The nurses had given me what they believed was a strong dose of painkillers. But Dr. Chen had secretly replaced it with saline. I was completely alert, but appeared completely unconscious. Ashley pulled her chair close to my bed. "David, I've been thinking about the timeline." "What about it? Why wait for Friday's meeting? If your mother takes a turn for the worse tonight, the power of attorney becomes irrelevant. The assets would transfer through the will, which could take months and involve probate. What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting that sometimes, when elderly patients are this fragile, their systems just shut down, especially if they accidentally receive too much medication." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. "Ashley, are you talking about—" "I'm talking about ending her suffering." "David, look at her. She's already gone. Her body just hasn't figured it out yet. That's murder." "No, that's mercy. An inheritance? Your mother dies peacefully in her sleep. You inherit everything immediately, and we can pay off our debts and start fresh. No power of attorney complications. No questions about competency. No years of expensive care draining her savings. How would we— Extra morphine in her IV, it would look like a natural progression. Elderly stroke patients die all the time. No one would question it." I heard David's chair creak as he stood up. For a moment, I thought he was going to refuse, to walk away, to remember that he was talking about murdering his own mother. Instead, he said, "When? Tonight? Late shift has fewer nurses. I'll handle it. All you have to do is be in the cafeteria when it happens, establishing an alibi. What about cameras?" "I've checked. The hallway cameras don't cover this angle, and the room camera has been malfunctioning since yesterday. These old hospitals, equipment failures happen all the time." They had thought of everything, every detail, every contingency, every way to cover their tracks, except for one thing. They had no idea their intended victim could hear every word. As soon as David and Ashley left for dinner, I opened my eyes and looked directly at the small camera that Tom's investigator had hidden in the flower arrangement Linda had sent that morning. "Did you get all of that?" I whispered. A nurse I didn't recognize slipped into my room. "Mrs. Thompson, I'm Rachel, and I work with Mr. Mitchell. We got everything. Crystal clear audio and video of them planning to murder you tonight. What happens now? Now we save your life and destroy theirs. The police are already en route. Doctor, Chen is preparing to transfer you to a secure room. And your daughter, Linda, just landed at PDX. Linda's here. She'll be here within the hour. She's bringing something special, a forensic toxicologist who's going to test that tea Ashley's been serving you. Mister. Mitchell wants enough evidence to ensure they never see the outside of a prison cell. For the first time in weeks, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope, Rachel. I need to ask you something. When they come back tonight, when Ashley tries to do what she planned, will I be safe? Mrs. Thompson, there will be 6 plainclothes officers in this hospital tonight. The moment Ashley touches your IV, she's going to prison. The moment David fails to stop her, he's joining her. Good, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being, because I want them to reveal themselves completely before this is over. I want the world to see exactly who they really are. Around 9 p.m., David returned alone. He looked nervous, constantly checking his watch and glancing toward the door. Hey, Mom, he said, his voice artificially cheerful. Ashley went to get some real food from that Italian place you like. She'll be back soon. He sat beside my bed, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. This was still my son, the boy who'd brought me dandelions from the yard when he was 5, who'd cried in my arms when his first girlfriend broke his heart. But then he leaned closer and whispered, Mom, I want you to know that I love you. This is all going to be over soon. The finality in his voice made my skin crawl. This wasn't a son comforting his dying mother. This was a man saying goodbye before a planned execution. At 10:47 p.m., Ashley returned with a small bag that definitely wasn't Italian food. How is she? She asked David. Same. Completely out of it. Ashley moved to the IV stand, and I felt my heart racing so fast I was afraid it would show in the monitors. But I'd learned to control even that over the past few days. She pulled a syringe from her bag. This will help her rest more comfortably. Ashley. David, go to the cafeteria, buy a coffee, talk to someone, make sure you're seen. I'll take care of everything here. I watched through barely cracked eyelids as my son, my own flesh and blood, walked out of the room so his wife could murder me in peace. Ashley approached my bedside with the syringe, and I could see the concentration on her face. This wasn't emotional for her. It was just business. You know, Margaret, she said conversationally as she prepared to inject the contents into my IV line. You really should have died 2 years ago when Frank did. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. She inserted the needle into the IV port. Don't worry, though. This won't hurt. You'll just go to sleep. And you won't wake up. David will inherit everything. I'll finally get the life I deserve. And you'll be with Frank again. Everyone wins. She pressed the plunger. And that's when the lights came on and 6 police officers flooded into my hospital room. Portland police. Step away from the patient. Ashley froze, searing still in hand, looking like a deer caught in headlights. Ma'am, drop the syringe and put your hands where we can see them. The next few minutes were chaos. Ashley screaming that she was just giving me prescribed medication. Officers securing the syringe as evidence. Dr. Chen rushing in to check my vitals and flush my IV line. And me finally sitting up in bed, looking Ashley straight in the eye as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. Surprise, I said. Turns out reports of my dementia were greatly exaggerated. The look on her face was worth every terrifying moment of the past month. Pure shock, followed by rage, followed by the dawning realization that she'd been outplayed by the confused old woman she'd tried to murder. David came running back at the sound of the commotion, only to find his wife under arrest and his mother very much alive and alert. Mom, what's happening? Why are there police here? David, I said. my voice steady and clear for the first time in weeks. "Sit down. We need to talk about the choices you've made and the consequences you're about to face. But the real confrontation, the moment when I would reveal everything I knew and watch their world crumble completely, that was still to come. Because tomorrow, we were all going to meet in Thomas Mitchell's conference room, where I would stop playing the victim and start being the prosecutor. The performance was over. Now came the justice. Friday morning, exactly 1 week after Ashley tried to murder me with a morphine overdose, I sat in Thomas Mitchell's conference room preparing for the performance of a lifetime. This time, though, I wouldn't be pretending to be confused. This time, I'd be revealing just how sharp my mind really was. The conference room at Mitchell and Associates looked like something out of a legal drama. Mahogany table, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling law books. Tom had chosen it deliberately. He wanted David and Ashley to feel the weight of real legal consequences pressing down on them. Ashley was out on bail. Thanks to David mortgaging his truck to pay the bond, she sat across from me wearing an Orange County jail jumpsuit instead of her usual designer clothes, her perfectly styled hair now hanging limp and unwashed. The contrast was almost satisfying. David looked like he'd aged 10 years in a week. Dark circles under his eyes, wrinkled clothes, the defeated posture of a man who knew his world was crumbling but couldn't quite believe it was happening. Tom had arranged for this meeting under the pretense of family estate planning discussion, the same type of meeting David and Ashley had thought they were attending to steal my assets. The irony was delicious. Now then, Tom began, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years practicing law. "We're here to discuss the Thompson family estate and recent developments." Robert sat to my right, having flown down from Seattle the night before. My brother-in-law looked confused and furious in equal measure. David had called him about my cognitive decline, but when Robert arrived to find me sharp as a tack and Ashley in handcuffs, he demanded answers. "I still don't understand what the hell is going on," Robert said, his Boeing engineer's mind struggling to process the family drama. "David told me Mom was losing her memory, but she seems fine to me." "Oh, I'm better than fine," I said, my voice carrying enough steel to cut glass. "I'm about to give everyone a demonstration of just how good my memory really is." Ashley spoke first, desperation making her bold. "Margaret, you have to listen to reason. You've been sick, confused. You're not thinking clearly about any of this." "Really?" I opened the folder Tom had prepared for me. "Let's test my memory. Shall we, Ashley? Do you remember the morning of March 10th when you told your friend Jenny over the phone, and I quote, 'Finally, we can get rid of this old house and move somewhere nice.'" Her face went white. "I never said that." Or March 12th, when you asked David, "How much longer can she live anyway?" while standing right outside my bedroom door, "You're making this up. Am I?" I nodded to Tom, who pressed play on a small recording device. Ashley's voice filled the room, crystal clear. She's 72. "David, how much longer can she live anyway? Besides, once we get the power of attorney, we can adjust her medication regimen, make sure she's comfortable." The silence that followed was deafening. Robert's mouth fell open. David stared at the recording device like it was a live grenade. That's taken out of context." Ashley stammered, "Context." I laughed. "And it wasn't a pleasant sound. Let me give you some context. Dear, for 6 weeks, you poisoned my morning tea with diphenhydramine, Benadryl. For those keeping track, the blood tests Dr. Chen ran show levels that could have killed me. I slid the lab results across the table, 280 milligrams in my bloodstream. The toxic dose for someone my age is 250 milligrams. You were literally slowly killing me while pretending to care about my health." David finally found his voice. "Mom, we never meant for you to get hurt. We were just trying to..." "To what?" "David, Let's be specific about what you were trying to do. I opened another folder. According to the emails we recovered from your computer, you were trying to establish power of attorney over an elderly woman showing rapid cognitive decline. You consulted with Richardson and Associates about expediting the incompetency documentation process. You researched the fastest legal methods for transferring property ownership from elderly parents to adult children. Each revelation hit like a physical blow. David slumped further into his chair with every document I produced. And Ashley, I continued, turning my attention to my would-be murderer. You researched Sunset Manor's admission requirements, contacted 3 real estate agents about listing my house, and withdrew $15,000 from your personal account to pay for estate planning services. So worst. How did I find out? Because while you thought I was a confused old woman losing her mind, I was actually a retired teacher with 40 years of experience dealing with liars, cheaters, and bullies. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize the signs? Robert stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. David, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't poison your own mother. David couldn't meet his uncle's eyes. Uncle Rob, you don't understand. We were desperate. We were going to lose everything. So you decided to steal from the woman who raised you. We weren't stealing. We were protecting her assets. By drugging her into incompetency, Robert's voice rose with each word, by planning to murder her in a hospital bed. That was Ashley's idea. Ashley shot him a look that could have melted steel. Don't you dare put this all on me. David, you were perfectly happy to inherit that house when you thought she was dying naturally. Naturally. I stood up, my voice carrying the authority I developed from 3 decades of controlling unruly classrooms. There was nothing natural about what you did to me. You looked me in the eye every morning and watched me drink poison. You sat by my hospital bed and pretended to grieve while planning my murder. The raw emotion in my voice seemed to hit David like a physical blow. For the first time since this nightmare began, I saw genuine remorse in his eyes. Mom, I'm sorry. I never wanted it to go this far. How far did you want it to go? David, at what point would you have stopped? When I was drooling in a nursing home, when I was dead and buried, when you were spending my money on your new life, we were going to take care of you, like you took care of me with those sleeping pills. Like Ashley was taking care of me when she tried to inject morphine into my IV. Ashley finally snapped. You're a sick old woman making up stories. None of this would hold up in court. That's when Tom smiled, the predatory smile of the attorney who's about to destroy someone's life. Actually, Ashley, let's talk about what will hold up in court. Tom opened his own briefcase, producing a stack of documents thick enough to choke a horse. Item 1. Complete medical records showing diphenhydramine poisoning at near lethal levels, with expert testimony that these levels could not have been self-administered. Item 2. Audio and video recordings of conspiracy to commit elder abuse, fraud, and attempted murder. Item 3. Financial records showing motive, David and Ashley's complete financial collapse and desperate need for immediate access to Margaret's assets. Item 4. Digital evidence of premeditation, internet search histories, email correspondence with estate attorneys, and research into accelerated power of attorney processes. Item 5. Witness testimony from Dr. Chen, 3 hospital staff members, and a forensic accountant who will explain exactly how they plan to steal $1, $2 million in total assets. With each item, Ashley grew paler and David slumped further into his chair. Item 6. Tom continued. Video evidence of attempted murder in a hospital room, with clear audio of Ashley administering what she believed to be a lethal injection, while David established an alibi. And finally, Item 7. Margaret's own testimony, delivered by a woman who has been fully competent and aware throughout this entire ordeal, documenting every detail of their systematic abuse, Robert was staring at David like he'd never seen him before. My God, David, what were you thinking? I was thinking about Emma and Michael's college funds. David exploded. I was thinking about losing our house. I was thinking about watching my family fall apart while Mom sits on nearly $1 million she'll never spend. So you decided to murder her for it. We weren't going to murder her. We were just speeding up the inevitable. Listen to yourself. I said quietly, listen to what you just said about your own mother, Ashley. Perhaps realizing that David was destroying any chance they had at sympathy. Tried a different approach. Margaret, you have to understand. We love you. Everything we did because we care about your welfare. My welfare, I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Ashley, do you remember what you said to me the night before you tried to murder me? She looked confused. I don't know what you mean. You thought I was unconscious, but I heard every word. You said, you really should have died 2 years ago when Frank did. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. The color drained from Ashley's face completely. You talked about my death like it was an inconvenience you were tired of waiting for. You discuss killing me the way other people discuss taking out the trash. That's not, I didn't mean, you meant every word. And David, when Ashley suggested murdering me with morphine, do you remember what you asked? David looked like he was going to be sick. Mom, please. You asked when. Not, are you insane? Not, we can't do that to my mother. Why, you asked when would be the most convenient time to murder the woman who gave you life. Robert stood up and walked to the window, his back to the room. I could see his shoulders shaking with either rage or grief. David, Robert said without turning around, you're Frank's son. Frank, who worked 3 jobs to pay for your college. Frank, who was so proud when you graduated, when you got married, when you had kids. What would he say if he could see you now? Uncle Rob, please. He'd disown you. Just like I'm about to do. Tom spread out another set of documents. Now let's discuss what happens next. Ashley, you're facing charges of elder abuse in the 1st degree, attempted murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and administration of controlled substances without a license in Oregon. These charges carry a combined maximum sentence of 25 years in prison. Ashley's bravado finally cracked. 25 years. I have children. You should have thought about your children before you tried to murder their grandmother. David, you're facing charges of conspiracy to commit elder abuse, fraud, and accessory to attempted murder. You're looking at 15 to 20 years. Depending on your cooperation with the prosecution. But I didn't actually do anything. You enabled everything. You provided access. You provided motive. You helped plan the execution. And you deliberately left the room so your wife could commit murder. In the eyes of the law, you're equally guilty. Tom turned to me. Margaret, the district attorney wants to know if you're interested in plea negotiations or if you want this to go to trial. I looked at David and Ashley, the son I'd raised and the woman I'd welcomed into my family, and felt something cold and final settle in my chest. Trial, I said. I want the whole world to hear what they did to me. I want every detail on the public record. I want other families to know what elder abuse looks like. And I want these two to face the full consequences of their choices. There's one more thing. Tom said, producing a final document. Margaret, tell them about your will. I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. Certainly. David, Ashley, I want you to know that 2 days ago, I executed a new will and testament. You've both been completely removed as beneficiaries. David went white. Mom, you can't, and I did. Your children, Emma and Michael, will still receive college funds because they're innocent in all this. But you two, you get nothing. Not a penny, not a photograph, not a piece of jewelry, nothing. Where does everything go? Ashley asked, her voice barely a whisper. Linda gets the house and half the liquid assets. The other half goes to elder abuse prevention charities. Frank's tools and personal effects go to Robert. My books and teaching materials go to my former school. Mom, please. David was crying now. We can work this out. We can make this right. David, you had 45 years to be the son I raised you to be. You chose to be a thief and a would-be murderer instead. Some choices can't be undone. I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in months. This meeting is over. I'll see you both in court. As I walked toward the door, Ashley called out one last time, Margaret, wait, we can explain everything. I turned back to face her. And when I spoke, my voice carried the weight of every betrayal, every poisoned cup of tea, every moment of terror I'd endured. Ashley, you tried to murder me for money. There is no explanation for that. There is no excuse. There is no forgiveness. David, you watched your wife poison your mother, and your only concern was how quickly you could inherit my house. You are no longer my son. And both of you need to understand something very clearly. I didn't survive 72 years on this earth to be taken down by two greedy cowards who mistook my kindness for weakness. I walked out of that conference room and didn't look back. Behind me, I could hear Ashley sobbing and David pleading with Robert to help them understand Mom's perspective. But understanding wasn't the point anymore. Justice was the point, and justice was exactly what they were going to get. Walking out of that conference room was like stepping into sunlight after months of darkness. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like myself again, not a victim, not a confused old woman, not someone whose life was being decided by others. I was Margaret Thompson, and I was taking my life back. Tom caught up with me in the hallway. Margaret, how do you feel? Free, I said, and meant it with every fiber of my being. For the first time in months, I feel completely free. The district attorney wants to meet with you next week to discuss your testimony. This case is going to trial, and your evidence is solid gold. Good. I want to tell my story in open court. I want other families to hear what happened, so it never happens to them. There's something else, Tom said, lowering his voice. David's attorney called this morning. They want to discuss a plea agreement. What kind of plea agreement? Full confession, victim impact testimony, and cooperation with the prosecution in exchange for reduced sentences. David would serve 8 to 10 years instead of 15 to 20. Ashley would serve 12 to 15 instead of 25. I considered this for exactly 3 seconds. No. Now, Margaret, you might want to think about, Tom, they tried to murder me, not steal from me, not just drug me. They planned and attempted to execute my murder for inheritance money. If I accept a plea deal, what message does that send to other families dealing with elder abuse? You make a fair point. Besides, I added with a smile that probably looked predatory, I want to watch them try to explain themselves to a jury. I want 12 strangers to hear exactly what my son and daughter-in-law thought my life was worth. 3 months later, State of Oregon versus David Thompson and Ashley Thompson became the most talked about case in Portland legal circles. The local news picked it up. Then the national media. The story of a grandmother who caught her own family trying to murder her for inheritance money struck a nerve across America. I testified for 2 full days. I told the jury about the morning tea ritual, about the gradual cognitive decline that only happened after drinking Ashley's special blend. I played the recordings of their conversations, walked them through the financial evidence, and described in detail the night Ashley tried to inject me with morphine. But the moment that broke the case wide open was when the prosecutor asked me, Mrs. Thompson, in your own words, what did you think was going to happen to you? I looked directly at the jury. 12 people ranging from a young father to a grandmother, not much younger than me, and said, they were going to kill me slowly, take my house and money, put me in the worst nursing home they could find. and wait for me to die from neglect or adjustment difficulties. Or if I took too long to die naturally. Ashley had already shown she was willing to speed up the process. 3 jurors were crying by the time I finished. David's attorney tried to paint him as a desperate father who got in over his head. Ashley's attorney argued that she was only trying to help an elderly woman who was clearly declining. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. They came back with guilty verdicts on all counts. David received 12 years in state prison. Ashley received 18 years. Both were ordered to pay full restitution for medical expenses, legal fees, and emotional damages, a total of $7,000 they didn't have and would never be able to pay. But the money was never the point. The point was justice. The point was consequences. The point was making sure they understood that some betrayals carry a price that can never fully be paid. With the trial behind me, I faced a decision: what to do with the rest of my life. The house in Portland, the house Frank and I had loved, where I'd raised my children, where I'd built 47 years of memories, now felt poisoned. Every time I walked into the kitchen, I thought about Ashley preparing my morning tea with that bright smile. Every time I passed David's old bedroom, I remembered the conversations they'd had about my death. So I sold it, listed it for $85,000 and received 3 offers above asking price within a week. Ashley had been right about one thing: the Portland real estate market was hot. I used part of the proceeds to buy a beautiful 1-bedroom condo in San Francisco, 20 minutes from Linda's house. The rest went into a trust that would fund college educations for Emma and Michael. They were innocent victims in this mess, and I wasn't going to punish them for their parents' crimes. Linda helped me move, and on my first night in California, we sat on my new balcony overlooking the bay, drinking wine and watching the sunset. "Mom, can I ask you something? Anything. Sweetheart, when did you know for sure? When did you realize what they were doing?" I thought about it for a moment. I think part of me knew something was wrong from the beginning. The questions about my will, the interest in my paperwork, the way Ashley watched me drink that tea every morning. But I didn't want to believe it. Why not? Because believing it meant accepting that my own son, the baby I carried for 9 months, the toddler who used to crawl into bed with me during thunderstorms, the man I'd loved unconditionally for 45 years, had decided I was worth more dead than alive. Linda reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry. Mom, I'm sorry they put you through that." "Don't be sorry. Be proud. Your old mother turned out to be tougher than anyone expected." 6 months after moving to San Francisco, I did something I never thought I'd do at 72. I started a new career. It began with a blog, Elder Abuse Survivor, a mother's story of betrayal and justice. I wrote about my experience, about the warning signs other families should watch for, about the legal steps elderly people could take to protect themselves from financial predators. The blog went viral within a week. I received hundreds of messages from people sharing their own stories: adult children stealing from elderly parents, nursing homes neglecting patients, financial advisors taking advantage of cognitive decline. The problem was so much bigger than I'd realized. That's when the San Francisco Chronicle called. They wanted to interview me for a feature story about elder abuse in California. Then CNN called. Then I was invited to speak at a conference for elder rights attorneys. Within a year, I was traveling the country, speaking at legal conferences, senior centers, and family workshops about recognizing and preventing elder abuse. I testified before state legislatures about strengthening protection laws. I worked with prosecutors on similar cases. The woman who'd been dismissed as a confused old lady became a nationally recognized expert on elder financial abuse. The irony wasn't lost on me. 2 years after the trial, I received an unexpected letter. It was from David, written on prison stationery in handwriting I recognized from homework assignments 30 years ago. "Dear Mom, I know I have no right to write to you, and I know you probably don't want to hear from me. But I needed to tell you something. I was wrong about everything. About thinking you were a burden. About believing we had the right to your money. About letting Ashley convince me that what we were doing was justified. I've had 2 years to think about what I did to you. And I'll have 10 more years to think about it. The other inmates know why I'm here. The story was in all the papers. They call me Mother Killer, and they're not wrong. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't expect you to ever want to see me again. But I needed you to know that I remember who you really are. You're the woman who taught me to tie my shoes and to treat people with kindness. You're the mother who sat up all night when I had pneumonia, who cheered at every baseball game, who helped me with algebra homework until we both wanted to cry. I betrayed all of that for money I didn't even need. Ashley and I were scared about our finances, but we weren't going to be homeless. We weren't going to starve. We were just greedy and impatient and stupid enough to think we could take advantage of your trust. You raised me better than that. Frank raised me better than that. I failed you both, and I'll spend the rest of my life knowing that. Emma and Michael ask about you sometimes. I tell them you're doing well, that you're helping other families, that you're the strongest person I've ever known. Because that's the truth. I love you. Mom, I know I have no right to say that anymore, but it's true. I'm sorry I forgot how to show it. David, I read that letter 3 times, then put it in a drawer with the rest of the case documents. I didn't write back. Some bridges, once burned, can never be rebuilt. But for the first time since this all began, I felt something resembling peace about my son. He was finally telling the truth. Emma and Michael, now 18 and 16, reached out to me through Linda about a year after the trial. They wanted to see me, to apologize for their parents, to try to salvage some relationship with their grandmother. I met them at a cafe in downtown Portland. Neutral territory where we could talk without the weight of family history pressing down on us. Emma spoke first. Grandma, we're so sorry. We had no idea what Mom and Dad were doing to you. I know you didn't, sweetheart. You were children. This was never your fault, but we feel responsible, Michael added. If we hadn't been so expensive, college, sports, all that stuff, maybe they wouldn't have. Stop right there. I reached across the table and took both their hands. Your parents' choices had nothing to do with you, and everything to do with their own greed and moral failure. You are not responsible for what they did to me. We talked for 3 hours. They told me about their lives, their plans, their fears about the future. I told them about my new work, my life in San Francisco, my pride in their resilience. When we said goodbye, Emma hugged me tightly. Grandma, we love you, and we're proud of you for fighting back. I love you too, both of you. And I want you to remember something. When people show you who they really are, believe them. But also remember that you get to choose who you become, regardless of who your parents turned out to be. Today, I'm 74 years old. I live in a beautiful condo in San Francisco. I travel the country speaking about elder abuse prevention. And I wake up every morning knowing that no one is going to poison my coffee. People ask me if I'm bitter, if I hate David and Ashley for what they did to me, if I regret the harsh sentences they received. The answer is no to all of it. I'm not bitter. I'm free. Free from people who saw me as a burden rather than a human being. Free from the illusion that blood relation guarantees love or loyalty. Free from the fear that I'm helpless against people who want to take advantage of me. I don't hate David and Ashley. I pity them. They threw away their freedom, their children's respect, and their family relationships for money they could have earned honestly if they'd been willing to work for it. And I don't regret their sentences because consequences matter. Every elderly person who doesn't become a victim because someone heard my story and recognized the warning signs, that's worth David and Ashley spending the next decade imprisoned. Last month, I received a letter from a woman in Ohio whose daughter had been asking suspicious questions about her finances and trying to convince her to sign power of attorney documents just in case. She'd heard my story on a podcast and recognized the patterns. She confronted her daughter, discovered evidence of financial manipulation, and cut off the relationship before any real damage was done. Her assets are safe. Her independence is intact. And her daughter learned that elder abuse has consequences. That letter meant more to me than any award or recognition I could receive, because that's what this was all about. Not revenge, protection. Not just justice for me, but prevention for others. Frank used to say that the measure of a person's life isn't how long they live, but how much good they do while they're here. I thought my useful years were behind me when he died. I thought I was just going to fade quietly into elderly irrelevance. Instead, I discovered that sometimes life's most important chapters begin when you think the story is almost over. If there's one thing I want people to remember from my story, it's this: trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, if people are asking strange questions about your money, if anyone is trying to rush you into legal decisions for your own good, listen to that voice in your head that says something isn't right. You are never too old to fight back. You are never too vulnerable to seek help. You are never too confused or scared or isolated to find people who will believe you and stand with you. And remember this above all: the people who truly love you will never see your death as a financial opportunity. I'm Margaret Thompson. I'm 74 years old. I live alone by choice, and I've never been happier or more proud of who I am. They thought they could break me down, steal my dignity, and take everything Frank and I built together. They were wrong about everything, but they learned something valuable. When you try to destroy Margaret Thompson, you better make sure you finish the job. Because if you don't, she's going to destroy you right back, and she's going to enjoy every minute of it.